Hey everyone, thanks for tuning back in with another author interview. Today it's my distinct pleasure to introduce JT Ellison, a powerhouse in the world of fiction. JT has over 30 novels to her name. Her work has been published in 28 countries. She has earned spots on the New York Times and US Today bestseller lists. JT also writes contemporary fantasy under the pen name Joss Walker. She is the Emmy Award-winning co-host of Nashville Public Television show A Word on Words. And today we're going to delve into JT's prolific career, her writing process, and her latest work, A Very Bad Thing, out November 1st. Welcome, JT Ellison.
Hi, thank you. It's good to be here.
So today we're mainly going to be talking about A Very Bad Thing. We have a lot to cover with your, oh, perfect, out November 1st. I love the cover. I love the pink.
The big pink book. Look at how huge
Yeah.
that thing. Yeah, I love it too. I love it too. It's, sometimes cover really can make a huge difference with a book. And this one, I think, really has.
Yeah, it definitely will catch the eye of many a reader who won't exactly know what's coming for them, especially with that prologue. It is incredibly gripping. How did you come up with the idea of starting the story with such a powerful confession?
So my main goal, right? I have to get you at the first line. That is, I have to get you at the first line and I have to keep you to the last line. And there's 500 pages in between. So it has to be something that's going to ask a question, right? So a thriller structure, you ask a question in the beginning and you answer the question at the end. So it's asking a question. And the question is, Columbia is writing this letter, and my darling daughter, many years ago, I did a very bad thing. Well, you immediately need to know, what was that bad thing? I want to know what she did. And of course, you're not allowed to find that out right away. You've got to get through the machinations of the story. But I love a good prologue. Everybody says, oh, don't do a prologue, just start the story. And I think the prologue is the start to the story. I think that's giving you the frame for what voice you're going to have and what the structure of the book is going to be, and the tone. Everything gets wrapped up in those first few paragraphs, and it's incredibly important, I think, especially in suspense, to set yourself apart with the voice, with the tone, with what this is going to be for the reader. So I spend a lot of time getting the openings exactly where I want to be, and for this one, I actually had this and I had a slightly different opening. And when I turned it into my editor, she said, what happened to the letter? I said, oh, you want the letter instead? Because I listened to all of those niggling voices that say, no, start with the action. And I switched it. And she was like, no, I want that letter back at the beginning. And so I moved the letter back to the beginning. So 30 books, still making those mistakes, right?
I mean, the letter I think was the right choice here. It was great. For me, I love a prologue. I love, it's almost like, you get the blurb, it's like the trailer, if you will, but then you get the prologue. It's like, okay, like I've dipped my toe in, and like that's your opportunity to really hook the reader. And I was definitely hooked. I had the pleasure of getting an early copy, and I was so excited, but I read it so quickly. It's almost like bittersweet when you get those early copies for like review, and you read them and you're like, oh, this is great. But then it comes out and you're just kind of like standing to the side, like watching everybody else enjoy it. And you're like, I wish, you could get that first read back for the first time. But I'm super excited for it to be out in the world and to see what everyone else thinks. Our character, Columbia Jones, she's depicted as a renowned author with hidden secrets. What inspired you to explore the theme of maybe like fame's darker side? I really think it did a lot to shape the characters and the plot.
It really does. So, we're living in this really interesting moment in time where everything we see about all of the people that we know and love is curated. Even our friends, we're seeing curated versions of them. We're not seeing the real people. And so I'm fascinated by that because I'm obviously participating in it as well. I've got an Instagram that's, being designed and thoughtful and all of that. And it does a lot better when it's designed and thoughtful than, when I'm like, oh, I'm going to post a picture of my cat right now. She's upside down, right? So the idea that we're living in this superficial environment all the time. What are people hiding, right? Are they hiding things? Everybody has a secret. And that's so intriguing to me. I'm always looking, and we see these stories all the time about this influencer who she's got this perfect life, and then in the background she's starving her children,
Mhm.
and is going to jail for that. The facade is fascinating to me, and I wanted to pull back the facade on somebody and see what is really going on. And of course, we start the story. Columbia is dead. Columbia
Mhm.
dies in the beginning. And that was also a huge challenge of what would it be like to have a character who can't speak for herself. All that we can get from her are the reactions of all the people around her. So she's the center of this circle, and we've got all the spokes of all the point of view characters who have to give their versions of what they know about this woman, which I think is really a commentary on our society right now.
Yeah, that's a great point, and especially with the whole influencer like culture that we have right now, just with everything, even if you're not necessarily an influencer, I think there's a lot of pressure to appear a certain way when we're putting ourselves out there. So I think
And
that's really
it's not
great.
healthy. I mean, that's
Yeah, I
not a
agree.
healthy way to live, right? That we have to be buffed and polished and shined at all
Mhm.
moments. I don't think that that's healthy for us as creatives at all. It's really not healthy for us as people. And it's
Yeah.
ruining our interactions with everyone. You meet somebody and you've seen the glamorous version, and you meet the real person and you're just like, oh, they're just a person. And when
Mhm.
the mystique is gone, what do you have left?
Yeah. I within like the Bookstagram community too, there's a lot of back and forth about what you're supposed to be doing. And there's one account that I follow, and I'll definitely put the information here, but um, she kind of takes things as my aestheticless besties, and that's like her thing. She's like, I'm not doing the whole aesthetic thing. I'm just here to talk about books. And I love that. She's very genuine. She's very nice. She's actually one of the is it a polycon or something that
Apollo, yeah.
yeah, she was picked for an influencer for that, and I was super excited for her because she definitely deserved it. But she had a following because I think so many people resonated with the, oh, I don't have to put on a show to participate here. I can just talk about books, and I don't have to like books that are in or, talk about things that are trendy. I can just be myself. And I
Right.
really, really respected that. So I'm definitely going to share her information when,
Yeah, do.
when this
I'd like to
comes out.
follow her because, finding authentic relationships online is, paramount.
Yeah, agreed. But we were talking about the people around Columbia. So this story, it's told from multiple perspectives. Several of your books that I've read within the past few years, it's been multiple perspectives involved. So in this one, we have Columbia, we have Darian, Riley. There's other characters as well. I love your supporting characters. I think that each of your characters really they do have a distinct voice. Um, and when you have multiple perspectives, I think that it's important that there is that distinction and that it still contributes to the narrative. And your dialogue feels very natural. Can you speak to that? If it just takes practice, or how much you have to, how much do you really have to dissect those um, those conversations and those perspectives?
I'm laughing because the dialogue was not my strength in the beginning at all. I came out of a creative writing program, and so everything was grammatically correct, and people don't speak in grammatically correct sentences. And that, I think, is the huge key to all that. And my husband read an early draft of one of the early books and said, it's very stilted. People don't really talk like that. And I said, well, how am
Mm,
I supposed to fix that? And he says, well, just listen to how people talk. So, I'm a voyeur all the time. I think all authors are. We like to observe and then record. And so that's what I started doing. I started listening to how people talked and the cadence of how they interrupt themselves and
mm,
drop off and everything. And that really helped. So, but to create the voice for each individual character, I mean, they're my friends, right? These characters are my friends or my enemies or whomever they need to be in this story, and they're as distinct to me as my friends.
mm,
So, when your best friend is calling or texting, you can tell it's them because just the conversation and what they say and how you interact. And it's the same with characters. And I think that's something really important to know about them. You know, who are they? How do they fit into the story? Obviously, but who are they as people? More than where they fit into the story. And once you have that, then they come alive. And it's, you know, I learned very early on never to put a character in that doesn't matter to the story. I mean, even a tertiary character who, you know, if they get a name, they have to play a role in some way. And
Okay.
that way there's nobody just disposable on the pages unless
Right.
they don't have a name, they're disposable. But if they're named, then they have to have something that they give to the story. So from primary, secondary, tertiary, all the way down, that's what I'm thinking about. Where are they in the story and who are they as people?
Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Whenever I read where there's multiple perspectives, I'm like, I love this. Like as the reader, I love it because you can really get into that character's mindset. But then I also write, and looking at it from that point of view, I'm like, this is like challenging. It's like you're completely changing, the voice of the narrator, the point of view, everything. So you do it well, and I enjoy that multiple multiple points of view when I'm reading. This book for me was, I mean, coming off of It's One of Us.
Mhm.
I loved that. And that for me was like just a lot of wow, just a lot of twist here, twist there, a lot of things that made sense, but I didn't necessarily see coming. I knew something was coming, but I didn't know what it was. I mean, with your books, you always know something's coming. It's like that's just how you write. But I
I like
love
that
that.
reputation.
Yes.
Something's coming.
Yes.
Watch out.
But with the unexpected twists, I think it's important that they contribute to the story. They make sense. It's not like where did this come from? And with this book, even until the very end, there, I was like, "Phew, she did it again!" Like, oh, wow. Um, so how do you approach that? Do you plan some of the twists in advance? Do they just kind of come organically as you're writing? How does that work for you?
So, you know, it's funny. I feel like I skipped from It's One of Us to the book I'm writing now.
Hmm.
This book, I mean, it's huge. I obviously spent a lot of time working on it, right? But I haven't spent a lot of time talking about it
Hmm.
yet. So it's I don't like to outline. So let's just start there. I don't like to outline. So the twists that come are usually very organic to the story. I didn't know for sure how this one was ending. If that, I'm trying to
Hmm.
talk around
Yes.
a
Talk
lot of
around it.
things
Hmm.
because I really don't want to give this all away. Um, Enough so that somebody who has read it didn't finish and was crowing about how right they were. And I was like, you
Hmm.
didn't read the last chapter?
Yeah.
That's awesome. You know, that just makes me happy. People
Hmm.
just assume, right? You get into a
Hmm.
mindset and you're like, this is it. And if I can take that and twist it, if I can wring that rag a little bit
Hmm.
and get one more drop out of, oh wait, there's more.
Hmm.
But this one, you know, my cat died in the middle of it. And so it was like this horrific fever dream of trying to write this book in a state of unbelievable grief. And honestly, until that moment, I don't think that I was able to capture who Devin was losing her mother. It was very strange. Several of my dearest friends lost their mothers while I was writing this book, and I had a barrier between myself and Darian and her emotions towards Columbia
Hmm.
and losing her mother. And then when I lost the cat and I experienced a wave of grief so overwhelming,
Hmm.
I was able to connect with Darian and find a way for her to grieve on the page and make people understand. So that came very late to the story. And when that happened, then the story started doing all of its natural twists. Yeah, I
Hmm.
have a tendency, I'll be banging my head against the wall and then I'll start work that day and something will happen and there's the twist. So I don't necessarily plan them out ahead of time. I let them happen with the story. When I find them, I sometimes then go back and see, okay, did you seed that? And I've put the little seeds in the ground as I go. And then, oh, hey, the flower came up. Look, here it is. Surprise. So I surprise myself. And if I surprise myself, I surprise you as the reader. And that's the whole point, right? I want you to be surprised. I want it to be surprising yet inevitable. And that's, I think, what this one is for sure.
Yeah, I definitely got that. And my next question here, kind of wrapping up for a very bad thing, is, what else do you want readers to know about the book, and what message do you hope resonates with them? Which I think we've kind of touched on a little bit with the facade of, social media. But any final thoughts here?
Well, it's really interesting. There was two news events that really affected this book. One was the murder of a young mother in Memphis that was absolutely horrific. And the social media explosion from that, I find those really, really interesting, how the entire internet becomes focused on one event, and the hashtags that start
Mhm.
and the opinions that are given, and all of the things that happen when we have a crime case that everybody fixates on. That really influenced how I wanted Columbia's death to explode on the internet and become the conversation and become a hashtag, become a trending topic. And the other was Sir Salman Rushdie being stabbed on the stage at an event talking about finding protective spaces for threatened authors, which the irony of that is absolutely incredible.
Right.
I'm right now reading his book Knife, and it is as incredibly detailed and lurid and awful as you can imagine. And that happened well into the writing of this book. And it's everybody's nightmare that something happens to an author on tour.
Mhm.
And that's, it's my nightmare, obviously, as well. I mean, it's just the scariest thing. You're out, you're alone, you're in strange cities, you're meeting
Mhm.
strange people. There's all these ways that the whole tour can go off the rails. And so, it was sort of a fun thing to think about until it happened.
Mhm.
And I really thought about abandoning the book at that point because it just felt much too raw and much too prophetic. But I also, when he survived, which helped a lot, thank God, that it made me feel like, wow, maybe there's a platform to even talk about this. So
Right.
I recommend his book about the experience. He's an incredibly lyrical writer anyway, but wow, it's incredibly poignant and well done.
Yeah, I'll check that out, and I'll put the information here too, so that way others can. Talking about like the rise of social media platforms and how just society works today, things like BookTok, Bookstagram. I imagine that changes the way that you market your books. And do you think these platforms have created better opportunities for new authors?
I think anytime you have an opportunity to have something discovered and go viral, sure. The problem is we're trying to be discovered and going viral.
Hmm.
And talk about organic and authentic. It's something that you can't create. And I think people have a hard time. I mean,
Hmm.
especially as a new author trying to break in, to be trying to create the thing that is going to go viral. I think Brianna Randall had a really interesting setup that happened with her
Hmm.
book, that she created this very simple, authentic Instagram feed that everybody started flocking to because it felt real. And it's not real. She started saying, she started giving marketing classes on how to do it. So if you're able to give a marketing class on how you did
Hmm.
something, it wasn't really real in the end. I think it started very real, and then
Hmm.
it became what it became. You can very rarely can you sell your own book. You can sell somebody else's book. And I think that's the biggest thing, is getting the book in front of an influencer who will talk about it, who will share their experience with your words. And now all the influencers are being completely inundated. So
Hmm.
it's become another business and another marketing angle. And so where is the authenticity again? It's a, snake eating its tail, right? You've got the Ouroboros going on
Right.
with this situation. And it's, TikTok is a really good example of how a book can explode if the right person is talking about it. But now that publishing on Total is trying to market to that,
Mm-hmm.
it's 10 times harder. So, I mean, my advice to new writers is don't try to get discovered. Write a book that nobody can ignore. Spend all of your time and energy on creating a product that people will go mad for instead of trying to create the product around the product.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree with you. Even having like a Bookstagram, which really I mainly did because I didn't want like my private Instagram and pictures of my son and my family to be public. I just didn't want that. So I created a separate one. And even with that, it's like for people to follow you and I mainly share book reviews. Well, Bookstagram doesn't really like book reviews.
Nope.
They
Nope.
like
Not anymore.
they like book like reels about books. And so it's like it always, the algorithm, it always changes, and it's like like I don't care about pleasing the algorithm. I like to review books, I like to share that, so that's what I do, and whatever happens happens. And
Right.
that's how I feel about it. And it's you're doing this because you have a passion for it. I feel like it's very easy to lose that because you focus on going viral or getting 20,000 followers or something.
Right.
I think I really liked what you said about like with the hashtags and everything. Like even with a very bad thing, it's like we see something happen there where it's not so good.
Yeah.
And that, and
Worst
and
case
that
scenario.
yes, worst case scenario. And that's very true too. Thankfully, most of what I see on Bookstagram and BookTok, it's positive. But something I've never enjoyed is reading a review that's like mean. Even if I write a review, I generally will not publish a review to the public. I might on NetGalley for like the publisher if it's under 3 stars. I
Right.
won't do it. And then I might send a message if it's like an indie author or somebody smaller who wants to know why. I will message them privately. I don't enjoy reading like bashing reviews. I don't enjoy it at all.
No.
Some books that it doesn't matter what anybody says about it. Things like maybe like Rebecca Yarros, for example. I mean, everything that she's written now is like very viral. Books that she wrote before the Empyrean series, but you can read bad reviews about that, and like that doesn't impact her sales generally. But you get like a newer author or somebody who doesn't have years under their belt, and that's very impactful, and they're probably reading them. And I think that it's important to be supportive, and you can be constructive without being mean. And I think that social media, it's easy to hide behind a keyboard and be mean, and
Yes.
as we saw in a very bad thing. So I would agree with you that it's the snake eating its tail a lot of times with social media and things today. But another platform that you have that I love following you is Substack. So your Substack, it offers a unique look into your writing process. And for me, as like a writer, if you will, um, I really enjoyed that. And one of your posts about the 40 scenes, for me, that was like, this worked for me.
Mm.
Um, this helped me to not write myself into a corner. So for your Substack, you share different things. I like your Friday Reads posts. How has this platform helped you to connect with, you think, maybe readers or more so peers? And what feedback have you found most valuable there?
I love Substack because I can do it.
Mhm.
I don't need help. I don't need someone to make the reels. I don't need someone to, do the bells and whistles and everything. I designed the whole thing from scratch. I one of the things I learned early on in publishing was how to do website design,
Mhm.
because I ran a group blog and nobody knew how to do it. So my husband and I, we both had to figure out how to run websites back
Mhm.
then. So I taught myself how to code and how to build and how to make things look good and everything. So I built that from the ground up. I love it because it's just words, right? It's not, the aesthetic of it is very easy because they have a built-in stock photo system, and I knew exactly what I wanted it to look like. I wanted it to be a Bookstagram style
Mhm.
look, but it's about the words and it's about my experience writing. And Friday Reads is something, I've always had a Friday blog for years and years and years and years. Every time I try to stop having a Friday blog, I start missing it. So I was like, all right, I want to do something that's always going to be free, that everybody can interact with. And we've got this great little group of people who come every week and talk about what they're reading. And there is nothing better than putting something out on the internet and having people interact with it, even
Mhm.
if it's just to leave a like, that's that keeps me going, right? That
Mhm.
keeps me wanting to interact with people when they come and interact with me. So I'm a projector. So invitations are very important to me. So me putting myself out there is really difficult and completely against my human
Mhm.
design. So when people do interact with, when I put something out there, that actually gives me great pleasure. The other part is the writing series and the craft essays and all of that. And that is paid
Mhm.
because, I've got 20 years in this industry now. And I think I've got a little bit of insight into how things work. It's not an expensive subscription, but it is something that I've decided, all right, if I'm going to start sharing writing wisdom for real, like
Mhm.
not the topical stuff, I'm going into really deep detail of how I do it, with the emphasis on there is no right way of doing it. There are many ways up the mountain. Here's just what's working for me.
Mhm.
And that has really resonated with people in a way that I was very happy, because it is a lot of fun to do. It's a lot of work. I mean,
Mhm.
I'm what I'm doing is live writing the writing of my next novel. And I figured out there are 22 steps. I was just messing around one day. I was like, oh, there's 22 steps to publishing a novel from concept to publication day.
Mhm.
Huh. Well, that's interesting. Maybe I will write the steps. Turns out there's a bunch of other little sub
Mhm.
steps and things. So I'm at 82,000 words on this book, and I've written 35,000 words about the writing of the book,
Mhm.
which is, I'll obviously turn that into a writing book. It's going to be my writing book that I've always wanted to do. But it has been really fun. It has also been really frustrating because, as you know, because you've read it, I decided I was going to outline this book
Mhm.
because, 30 books in, let's change your process. And um, it failed spectacularly. I did the outline. I outlined the entire book and I got going and I was working along. And then, so, it was a really good experience for me also to prove that I have a process and I don't need to change it.
Right.
But it's a lot of fun. The Substack environment is there's a lot of incredible writing on there from all kinds of worlds. And I love
Mhm.
having it all in one place where you can just open it up and really experience some high quality work.
Yeah, I enjoyed the piece about the spider gray. So I'll know, like I'll look for that. I'll
Gray
look
is
for that
gonna,
to
yeah,
mod.
I'm trying to figure out. I think I know where it's about to pop up.
Mhm.
Um, yeah.
That was cool. And as I was reading it, I was like, this is really cool. I was like, I wonder if she's supposed to be writing something else right now, and she's now writing this instead.
So I find out completely by accident my editor is reading my Substack, which is like, that's good to know, because she sent me a note and said, "Wait a second, you're looking at my lake," because she lives on the other side of Lake
Mhm.
Michigan, and I was like, so I maybe cheated on you with this essay because I was supposed to be right. Yeah, it took a morning, but it's really interesting. I have learned in all of the years that I've been doing this, there's one thing I've learned. If I am inspired to do something, I have to do it because it's going to lead me somewhere.
Mhm.
And it did lead me somewhere in the book that I hadn't gotten to yet. And so that's, it's like, okay, So trust your gut. If your gut says, oh, I know I'm supposed to write my 1,000 words today, but I need to write an essay about a spider hanging off the side of a 39th story window, do that, because you just never know. You just never know what that's going to bring for you.
Yeah, and talking about the journey and inspirations along the way, your career now spans multiple genres. How has your writing style and the process evolved going from like your first novel to now multiple genres and now going into like contemporary urban fantasy?
So it's funny you say that, because I have the rights back to 3 of my Taylor novels,
Hmm.
and I'm putting them back in print. And one of the things I have to do that is read them. I mean, I have to
Hmm.
format them. And so to format them, I need to make sure that the formatting is correct. And the only good way to do that is to read them. And I started with 14, which is the second Taylor Jackson novel. And I was about 10 pages in, and I went, oh my God, this is so dark. This is so dark. And my husband's looking at me, he's like, what? And I read him a section. I mean, I was like turning red. I couldn't believe how incredibly dark it was. And he
Hmm.
was like, yeah, you used to write really dark stuff. It's really good. And it wasn't that it was bad. It just was super, super, super dark. And reading that then, now, 20 years later, it helped me realize, okay, you had a very interesting trajectory with your voice through all of the different genres, because the voice is always the same. But I grew very bored of that level of darkness, that
Hmm.
level of violence against women, against the victims. It became too much. And I pivoted away from that purposefully. And in so doing, my voice changed. And so my voice now is much, it's still dark, but it's more accessible, I think, to readers. I think it is not going to shock and titillate the way some of the earlier things did. At the time, that was what all the women were writing, right?
Hmm.
That was very much, how do you fit in with the male writers? You have to write something so egregiously over the top. And thankfully, we own suspense now, for the most part. There's some
Hmm.
fabulous male suspense authors, but for the most part, we have taken this and made it more accessible. And it's not that it's softer, it's just smoother. And that's what my voice has done. It depends though on what genre it is. Obviously, if it's a Taylor book, which I just wrote a new Taylor book last year, and it was really difficult to go back into that world and
Hmm.
pull because I've changed, right? As a person, as a woman, as a writer, I have changed so much over this time frame that it was a big challenge to go back in time 10 years and try to pick up that person's voice. And I couldn't do it. So the character had to change
Hmm.
in order to accommodate me as an artist changing. You're a different person when you come to the page every single day.
Hmm.
If you've moved the story forward, if you're not just circling back and editing, but if you've moved the story forward, the story is different than it was the day before. And we're in this constant evolution. And it can be very destabilizing sometimes to feel like, wow, everything that I do every single day is different. But it's also just how you grow as a writer, how you grow as an artist. So when I move into, from Taylor into international intrigue, and I'm writing
Hmm.
spy thrillers and they're completely over the top and they're James Bondy and there's, mustache twirling villains, to suspense, which has gotten, very, very deep and dark, and deep is the word I want to use there. That it's not that it's dark, it's deeper. The characters are deeper. The way
Hmm.
I explain the difference between the thrillers and the suspense, the police procedurals that I used to write and these books, is a door. And in the earlier books, the main character knocked on somebody's door and gave them the worst news of their life. In the suspense novels, you're on the other side of the door with character, and it's knocked upon, and you get to experience what's happening as their lives are being blown up. And I think that just naturally lends itself to being something.
Right. I like that comparison.
And then you jump into the urban fantasy and it's a completely different,
Mhm.
and you know, it's those books have gotten more and more serious as, you
Mhm.
know, obviously the stakes get higher and higher. In the beginning, the Jane Thorne CIA librarian books, Jane is just totally irreverent, right?
Mhm.
She is a smart aleck and she just wants to do her thing. And, you know, by the end, she has changed. And that's
Mhm.
the character has to change over the course of the series, unless you're writing, you know, an iconic hero that's never going to change. But I'm not. I mean, she's a hero and she is changed by her circumstances. And it's been really fun to go from this happy, irreverent person to this very serious, saving the world, making a sacrifice person, and watching that transition. So anything you do, the voice and the tone and the writing style changes a little bit.
Yeah, and to talk about the Jane Thorne series, the CIA librarian series, it's for me it's pretty cool. As a when I was younger, like I read Harry Potter, I read Lord of the Rings, I read, you know, Chronicles of Narnia, I read things like that. But then as I got older, I didn't read fantasy at all. And you like, you know, posted I think on Instagram one day and I was like, this is interesting. And I was like, I don't know. It's like, I don't know. I don't really read that anymore. And that got me back into fantasy.
Yay!
So that was like, you know, let me dip my toe here. And I was like, oh, I love this. I didn't know what to expect. I was like, but I know her writing and I know I like her writing. So we're going to give it a try. And from that, I read some after that, I read like Sarah J. Maas. I read, and now I'm like back real deep
Yeah,
into the world of fantasy. So it's interesting how that happens because if you know, if I hadn't read that, maybe I wouldn't have jumped in like I did. Maybe it would have taken longer. So thank you because I
you're
would have
welcome.
missed out on so much. I love reading multiple genres. Um, Sometimes I feel like that just matches my personality. I kind of bounce around. So I love that. And I'm eagerly anticipating the Book of Spirits, which I believe is the fifth book
Yep.
in the Jane Thorne series, and that's coming out late November, I
Yeah,
think.
late November, November
Target. Okay.
book
Are
is
you
done.
able?
Book is done. I've already done my first pass. You know, I'm like, I'm ready to go, but I've got a close deadline, so I'm trying to finish the other book first. But um, and the sixth book is, I mean, completely outlined everything. I can't believe I'm wrapping up this series. It's I knew it was 6 books, right? It was
Mhm.
always going to be a 6 book series, and that we're now getting to the end of this story, this reverse dystopian where we start in a world that magic doesn't really exist for people, and then we end in a world that people who don't have magic are going to be very rare. You
Mhm.
know, that was always the perspective of this. I love fantasy too. I mean, it's such and writing fantasy is so much, I don't want to say easier, it's not, because of the world building and the rules and
Mhm.
the structure that you have to put into place and the things that your magic can and can't do. But wow, it is so much easier when you get stuck to just do a spell and get yourself
Mhm.
out of it. Right? I love Sarah J. Maas as well. I love Rebecca Yarros. I love
Mhm.
Victoria Schwab. I mean, I read Lee Bardugo, uh, everybody, Holly Black. I just
Mhm.
read the Cruel Prince book, that
Yep.
duology. It's just so good. And you know, I'm with you. It's a nice palate cleanser between other genres. I read very, very widely of, you know, everything I can get my hands on, except horror. I will not read horror. I don't like horror. I have night terrors, and when I read horror, it just triggers the night terrors, and it's not, those are not fun nightmares, and I don't like to add to it.
Mhm. My best friend loves horror,
Ugh,
and I I'm kind of like you. I can't for me, I can watch something on TV that's terrifying and it's like I'm fine. But if I read something that's like that, it's like I can't my imagination is somehow worse than visually seeing something
I can't do
on a
movies
screen.
either.
Oh,
It's like
really?
even
I can
trailers, and it's like, "Ah!"
so the trailers always to me seem scarier than the movie itself. I don't know why, because they pick the, you know, the scariest, creepiest things. But yeah, I'm kind of with you on that. I can't read horror. I wish I could. Um, and like Stephen King, I think I have some of his writing books. Um,
Oh,
I forget the title, but I have
on
one and
writing.
it was really good. Yeah, that yes, thank you. It's so simple, but I forgot it. But that was really good. I have Fairy Tale that he wrote. I was like, this isn't probably scary, so I think I can do this one.
It's not, I mean, not all of his stuff is horror. I've
Mhm.
got a friend who is a aficionado. I've got a couple of friends that King is like their king. And one, he's been trying to inch me into horror. And so
Mhm.
he's given me a couple. And then I decided to read Rosemary's Baby because four of my friends said, and obviously that's Ira Levin, not Stephen King,
Mhm.
but and my Stephen King buddy was like, "What are you doing? How dare you try to read that without talking to me first?" And I'm like, "Yeah, you were right," because I didn't even get to the scary part, and I was already having
Mhm.
nightmares. I was like, "Yeah, there's something tonally about the destabilization that horror brings that
Mhm.
really just gets in my head."
Yeah, something for everyone. That's just not necessarily
Sure,
for me, but
right.
for those that love it, great.
I know. Have at it. I'm glad,
I know.
and it's seen such a huge resurgence, right?
Mhm.
Gabino Iglesias and Riley Sager right now are
Mhm.
just barreling down the path with it and really resonating. I mean, Riley's stuff is half horror, half
Mhm.
suspense, and I can't do it. I just can't do it. I can write it. Now, here's the
Mhm.
interesting thing: I can write horror because I'm in complete control of everything that's
Mhm.
happening, right? And obviously, I'm not being startled and grossed out and all of that, but I can't read it. It's very strange. But a lot of my short stories are supernatural horror.
Mhm.
Who knew?
Yeah. I
Who knew?
mean, it's definitely interesting. Like when you're writing, for me, like when I'm writing, it's like this is I can write anything. But then like for me, if I read something very similar, I'm like, this is shocking. So I would agree with you. I'm very much looking forward to the next Jane Thorne book.
Yeah, I'm
Jane
excited.
as a character, I mean, who doesn't love pie? Like I feel like it's just really easy to connect with Jane, and that the contemporary urban fantasy, that it's definitely lighter than
Yeah.
your other work, but it's very well done. I think the world building's great.
Oh,
With fantasy, it's like that can either make or break it, just the world building in itself. And I
mhm,
think you did a great job, because it's like, it's set, it's not like a, medieval or different time or whatever. It's like, it's like today's time, but
mhm,
everything seems to blend very nicely and work together nicely. And the additional characters there, once again, they all have their own voice. They all are very distinct and memorable. So, like, I mean, Killian from the very beginning, I loved Killian. So I'm sad that it's ending. Do you think that you'll write more fantasy or different genres in the future after that's done?
Um, yeah, yeah, I think I will. I can't imagine not. I've got the beginnings of an epic fantasy idea. Um, that I think would be really, really cool. And last night, I just realized I dreamed that I had two completely finished manuscripts for my agent of a different fantasy. So, clearly there's more fantasy to come. It is really a palate cleanser. It is really fun. It is an escape. There's a, there's just, the idea that there's magic in the world. I think there is magic in the world. Maybe it's not abracadabra kind of magic,
Mhm.
but just, watch a plant grow, watch a tree leaf out, watch anything around you. If we look up for 5 seconds, we will see something magical.
Mhm.
And the idea of capturing that, into a story. And yes, you're right. Everybody likes pie, and we're in such a bizarre moment in time that I think eat the pie is not a bad mantra.
Mhm.
Eat the pie, eat the piece of pie, right? Because you just don't know what tomorrow brings.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for joining me. Looking forward to A Very Bad Thing November 1st and November 28th for A Book of Spirits. Looking forward to both of those, and thank you so much again for joining me.
Thank you. Good to be here.